I think, as James noted, one of the things that the last talk said was all the things you should do right and all the things you can do right. I'm going to walk you through all the things we did wrong. And hopefully you guys can learn lessons from that and not make the same mistakes we did. But quick show of hands here. How many of you have heard of Big Huge Games before or saw Tim's talk? Yeah, that's awesome. How many of you played DomiNations? Okay, less than the Big Huge one, which is not, oh, I see some extra hands. So I will talk a little bit about DomiNations and Big Huge Games as a whole here. Big Huge Games has a pretty storied development. I mean, so does Baltimore, where Big Huge Games is located. Going back in time, I'm not going to give everyone a history lesson, but it started with microprose and flight simulators and things like that. And through the ages, the game dev sort of primordial ooze that is Baltimore kind of spawned things like Firaxis, Big Huge Games, Sparky Pants is another big one now. But this incarnation of Big Huge Games kind of came out of two studios' demise. Zynga East, which is a studio that worked on Frontierville, and Impossible Studios, which is an offshoot of old Big Huge that went to work for Epic on some Infinity Blade games that by their two studios closing, we kind of came back together as Big Huge Games 2.0. And one of the things that we do well at Big Huge Games is this sort of concept of making games that are big bets on innovative mechanics in proven genres. And so we also focus on one of our team's strengths is kind of building mobile strategy games with world histories as a backdrop. So that became DomiNations. And another word for DomiNations, if you want to just simplify it, is Clash of Clans meets Age of Empires. DomiNations was a pretty small team. Took about 20 months to get a prototype and a build together. Along the way, they picked up Nexon as a publisher, put out the game in soft launch. KPIs look great. We did a misnomer worldwide launch, which was really not everywhere, but it's everywhere but Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. And a few months later, we followed up with Asian territories. And if things go well, this month, or no, sorry, in August, we will be launching in China, so we hope that's going to go well. But I'm not going to be talking about too much of the future look. I'm going to kind of go back in time and look at events and DomiNations across 3 phases. Because when you're building a game, it's really easy to kind of see where you're going with things. When you're running a game and it's live, it's much harder, at least for the DomiNations team. It's hard to kind of get that live events cadence going, kind of figure out what we're doing. So I've divided into 3 phases here. We'll talk about the development to soft launch to the Asia launch. We'll kind of getting into how we built events and DomiNations, the tools we built around it, and then I'll do a little bit of future looking and the refining we did with their events. But again, most of this talk is focused on what went wrong. If you want to know what went right, skip back about 30 minutes and remember what the previous speaker said. All right, phase 1, 2013 to 2015. DomiNations never planned to have events in it. I think we were contractually obligated to put events in. And one of the things we did with that is sort of sidestepped having real events, and we made quests. We called them goals in game, and we put a timer on them. We also had leagues, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So the time goals and the quests met our contractual criteria for events, and they helped solve another issue of us running out of content because we only had a finite amount of goals in the game, only a finite amount of content, and after we sort of stepped you through what all the features were in the game, all the different units, all the different training options, we ran out of goals for people to do, and we saw a general drop-off when people would run out of goals. So we added these time goals in, and they sort of padded along the way, and they were endless. They would infinitely loop, and they would do things you're already doing in a game. So things like, these are the quests here. So things like train tactics. So you have to, this is my time goals for right now. You have to train 7 tactics, and I have a time limit to do it. So I can spend crowns to do it, but really I'm going to lose out on that value if I spend hard currency for that. But if I complete that goal, I get paid out for it, 3 crowns, and then next time I get that time quest, I'm going to get a harder version of it. I'll have to train 14 in the same amount of time, or double that, which is great. So it solved one problem in like us running out of content, but it was really pretty meaningless. And another sort of meaningless event thing we had was leagues, and leagues had seasons. Here's a picture of the league's leaderboard in a broken state, because there should be players under there. By competing in a league, I get a daily dock bonus, and there's a season. But the thing was, nothing mattered about those things, because these were just sort of automatic events. People didn't care when it started or ended. The timers were pointless. The rewards were super small, so we weren't really engaging player behavior. And wasn't engaging players the way we wanted to. So it filled our contractual requirement to have events in the game, but really was not doing much for the actual fun and enjoyment of DomiNations. Another thing that sort of undercut all this is these were events that you had to do when you were active in game. If you just did nothing and you got attacked in DomiNations, we actually paid you out better than if you were participating in these events. So Something to think about when you're building a Combat City Builder game. Don't do what we did there. But events aside, we were actually doing really well in our soft launch phase. So this is some data from our soft launch period in 2015. You can see we were rolling out into new territories, we're stacking users on top of one another, all the KPIs are measuring up for us. So we launched. But we were a pretty scrappy, small team. And for half of us, this was sort of our first game we've ever launched before. For the other half, this is our first free-to-play game that we've ever launched before. And for all of us, it was our first mobile game. So we launched. That's the early part of that chunk is our soft launch to real launch. So you can see the featuring we got on Android and iOS is a huge, big, meaty featuring. But with our scrappy team we had, the big launch was great, making a lot of money, but it also exposed a bunch of problems we had with the game, sort of underlying tech issues. And I've highlighted 2 of them there where we have server issues that either had outages or player rollback. Long story short, we rollback players' data, we uncorked a bug where players' bases would swap with one another, so we sort of had a CS nightmare with all these players we had. And this was bad, and if not for the tireless work of the team and sort of banding together to do it, I probably wouldn't be here today to talk to you guys about how we could turn it all around. So we were still in business, had some server problems, but we didn't really have events as outlined in the previous speaker. But we knew we were supposed to do events. That's what you do. You have events in a game, in a free-to-play game. It drives engagement, it can drive revenue, it can do all this stuff. But we limped into it. First one we did was something called Wildlife Wednesday, which I think was best described by a member on the forums, a DomiNations player on the forums. They called it Mildlife Wednesday. So as much as a terrible event as we'd planned, the first one we did was just came out the gate flopping out. Much like this talk is going right now, but we'll try to turn that around too. The next event we had, and we did this as a sort of to try to make up for some server outages we had, was what we called Stags Unleashed. And for context, in DomiNations, you get free currency every day because a stag appears on your map. And if you have free citizens available and you harvest it, you can get like 1 to 3 hard currency. It's sort of just a nice extra constant drip of hard currency that you can then use to advance in the game. But for Stags Unleashed, like really all we did was inject a whole bunch of premium currency into the economy that then we had to wait to siphon out. Because for players, like the event itself was supposed to be like, oh, players are going to love this. Instead of getting up to 3 crowns, now they can get up to 20 crowns. They're going to see more stags on their base. But we didn't quite get the drop rates right. So stags usually appear once every 12 hours. We changed it to once every 4 hours. I used to get 3 crowns per stag, and now we changed it to 20. But given some timing issues and some bugs, a lot of players didn't see stags, but according to our data, a lot of players did. So there was sort of mixed opinion of the event kind of stinking, but we broke the economy for a little bit, and like, what's the right move there? How do you kind of go forward from that? So the takeaway for everybody here is, stability is key in what you're doing. If you can't run an event without a bug, don't run the event. If you can't run an event with your servers toppling over, or you can't run an event without rolling people's data back, just don't do it. And I hate to, because I love this event, but I hate to pick on Niantic, but like the most recent example is that Pokemon Go live event they had. And what a cool thing it is to take an event in a game and put it in real life and to have cross functionality, the whole AR promise in the event. But then, they had problems with tech, they had problems standing it up, and they sort of repeated the mistakes that we had. This is like sort of 2 years on, and another sort of year on with Pokemon Go that they just couldn't keep their stability there. So for DomiNations at least, that stability, the lame events, the lack of getting content out there was kind of an impact on our revenue. And you can kind of see the trend there. And I've highlighted the server outages again. And for DomiNations, as we had planned to run it, we were just going to dump more content in. The promise of DomiNations is going from the Stone Age to the Space Age. We launched like just about the Enlightenment Age, so the 1800s. We'd done just about up to the 1900s in development, but we still weren't quite ready there. So we sort of cut half the release we'd planned to do, jammed it out there, and that's that oil boom little uptick there. And as you can see the sawtooth there, that's our weekends kind of spiking up and down, which had a lot of engagement on weekends. We put out more content. We thought that would be more engaging, but they quickly ate up that content, and we kind of went down the levels. And the blue line there is projecting us out. Had we done nothing, had we just continued what we're planning to do, we would have been in pretty dire straits. But we had a couple tricks up our sleeve. We had 3 things: special deals, crown sales, and new territory launches. Special deals are the bottom arrow there, you can see there's a timer on them, it's a unit, and really it's just effective surfacing of what we're already selling in-game. For special deals particularly, you could already spend in-game resources on upgrading your units, or you could spend hard currency on upgrading your units faster. Special deals were just a slight percentage off upgrading units right now, but you would spend actual cold hard cash for it. You would buy it as an IEP. So instead of buying crowns and then converting that into the unit, you would just spend $5 straight away. For whatever reason, that worked really well with our player base. So you'd age up the medieval age, you'd see a castle special deal. You could also go to the store, open that up, click on the castle. If you had the resources and citizens available, you could then start building your castle, wait a couple days, and then have your castle for free. But at $9.99 appearing on the HUD there, people were buying that. And it's something that, it's content that's freely available in game. You can play to get it, but by putting a price tag on it, servicing it, and putting a tiny discount on it, we were able to sell that. So special deals helped out there. We also did crown sales, and there's a whole talk about sales and crown, what the best pricing is for that. For DomiNations, we did the pretty standard free-to-play practice. What I think is a standard free-to-play practice is we didn't discount the actual IP price. So you're always buying a $9.99 thing. You were just getting additional crowns on top of that purchase. And as you purchase larger packs, you got a better bonus. That's sort of what we did. But where we were not having enough content in game and selling extra IP, selling extra hard currency meant we were just going to continue to accelerate that content, eating up of the content by the people that are super highly engaged in the game and spending money there. So sort of the rule of thumb we had for this is crown sales will be infrequent, and then they'll be tied to real calendar events. So we're not going to do a Wednesday sale, but we would do a 6-month anniversary sale. There's only going to be one 6-month anniversary we have. And actually happened to correspond with a big holiday in Korea, which brings us to our sort of saving grace of 2015 is a Monster Asia launch. And you can see here, these are the revenue trends for the game. And the added colors there are, the bottom one is our starter pack, which is a good deal. It's an extra builder, so everybody's getting that. Nexon, our partner, and our publisher, and now our owner, really pushed DomiNations in the regions. We had a flashy cinematic trailer, we had subway ads, we even had a series of historical rap battles between famous people in history. Super weird, but it's kind of cool. But rest assured, it was a huge launch and it drove a ton of traffic. But the trend of the behavior of the game really didn't change here. You can see we were doing well, started to slow down, launch in Asia again. It just changed our glide path, really. We're still on the same trajectory. Which kind of brings us to phase 2, and this is where the events really started working for us, I think. And for DomiNations and live events, we were super reliant on client updates. And that's sort of all right, that's one thing, it's a known thing. We kind of had our waterfall for pipelines for getting out new ages, and we knew what it cost for us to design it, to put art in it, and that was sort of fixed. But as you know, running free-to-play games, you have to do more stuff than that. And if you're pegged at 6 months to get a new age, you've got to get content in the game faster. So for us, one of the ways we build content was these config events, and we'll talk about those in a minute. We talked about sales before, and then the other part that kind of drove the rest of the value, the turnaround for DomiNations was our event systems in 2016. All right, so this is pretty standard stuff, and a lot of what just sort of game development, live ops stuff, come up with an idea, we price it out, we change it. For our config events, a lot of the bulk of what we did were discounts on existing units or buildings. We did a few around sort of events where training times were reduced or things got more powerful or things were cheaper to train, but most of the time we were discounting buildings because that's where the bulk of our content was. Balanced against the fact that we only have a finite amount of content. There's stuff that we would love to be able to switch, like citizen costs, times for buildings, but we found these fundamental architecture bugs we had. If we ever mess with those values, we could turn it off. We could only ever turn it off. We could only ever reduce time once. And if we ever tried to turn it back on, we would encounter all these really hairy bugs with players' blobs and mess with their accounts. All right, so here's a standard config event we would run. At the outset, it was surfaced 1 click deep. You have to click on the envelope to see it. This is a event called the General Blitz. It's translated into French here, and you can see there's a couple bugs. Because I had to put these in, and I was always messing it up. So they're supposed to have extra space there. But these config events were things like discounts. So for this particular one, we discounted castle upgrades by 50%, and our upgrades of our generals were 25% off, under level 20. And how did this affect our players? This is sort of the meat of the LiveOps stuff, and something I think that I hope you can take away some of the mistakes we made and kind of seize on the moment here and make better events for your stuff. I've created out some of the values that I didn't want to share, but the key here is that we had more people spending during the event, but particularly on the event items that we were discounting. So while like the percentage of people playing isn't quite a steep curve, it isn't quite a steep increase, the people spending on the event items, because they're discounted, went up quite a bit, 166% increase. But we discounted the castle 50%, but our overall spend on those things, even at a 50% discount, went up. So our spends per spender were going up on that because as they upgraded their castle, they're getting to higher levels of the castle, which is more expensive, took more time, so it was more revenue spent on that. So even at like a pretty steep half-off discount, we were still able to drive the spend values there. And the generals themselves, within the castle, you could train generals, and you had to unlock new generals by upgrading the castle, and the generals had to be leveled up individually. This one's a little bit trickier because we had launched Joan of Arc 2 weeks before we ran this event, so a lot of the popularity in the castle upgrades was unlocking Joan of Arc, and then the spend, the big red chunk there is upgrades on the newest general during the event period. So it's not super unknown that we would get a lot of spend there. New flashy stuff always seems to drive spend for us. Another kind of standard type of configuration we'd run is this thing called a town defense, where we do 50% off defense. So this is garrisons and stables where kind of dudes come out to fend off attackers, or horsemen come out to fend off attackers, or if you keep playing the game, you'll eventually get tanks, and they'll fend off your attackers too. I'm going to whip through these because I only have 12 minutes left. I've got a whole other event system stuff here. So spend went up, right? You're running discounts. Good things happen. But this sort of set a new bar for us. We had sort of thought we got all the value out of these config events. We kind of knew what we were doing. But because of the breadth of the spend we were seeing, we were sort of taken aback. So we had to kind of go and start comparing them against other events. And you can see the town defense event is the one there in the pink. And so we thought that was the best thing. And then as we kind of went and discounted more things and kind of pushed people around, we even got a better event in the tower defense 2. And this is tower defense 1 versus tower defense 2. We were testing pretty similar discounts. One of them had a little bit longer duration. So one ran for 2 days, the other ran for 4 days. So that's a little bit why the reason you see the discrepancies there. But the other thing that was key is as players aged up, they got to more expensive things, and so they were kind of having to drop more in to take part in the events. And that's the two age curves there between running the first event and the second event. All right, flying through. Others, it's not subtle, but it was not obvious to us, is we made a pop-up. We kind of been burned and zinged a lot of us by pop-up fatigue. You're playing games, you're constantly seeing something. You're having to click through 4 or 5 layers of closing dialogues before you get to the actual gameplay. So we didn't have one when we launched the game, and it took like a year of us having events running before we designed the first pop-up that would show you what actually was going on when we were running these events. And you can see there's details there on what the percentage off was, when it's running, and an OK button. But we were really short-sighted when we built it, because we were so burned by the multi-pop-ups, you could only ever run one pop-up under this system at least. So if we wanted to run like a sale and an event at the same time, you were making a choice between which one you were going to surface. They could both exist in the game, but you could only ever pop one thing up. It was super short-sighted. Don't do that. Figure out how you're going to like layer multiple things going on at the same time. Again, with config events, they kind of dovetailed really well with crown sales. When we would run these config events after crown sales, you can see the 2 inflection points. This is we'd sell a bunch of crowns during a crown bonus event. Those are the extra crowns out of the economy. That's the rise. When the sale goes off, the fall is people spending those crowns back down. The 2 inflection points there that the arrows are calling out are like when we turn on a config event. When the config events would go on, we'd start seeing the crown spend go faster, and that would kind of siphon out more crowns from the economy faster. This is kind of as far as free-to-play as I know it. These are kind of tame. You can see pushes and pulls a lot harder, but that ends up more of the shark finning that you get if you were like really pushing people to spend a lot and then siphoning all the crowns out. Push people to buy a lot and then siphoning all the crowns out. All right, 4 minutes left. Let's see if we can do this. The event system, separate from the config event system. I know the naming is super, super dumb. We have the config event system, and then we have the event system, and then later on we have the sale event system. Bad naming nomenclature, you should figure that out when you start. But the thing with the event system is it's rewarding in-game behavior that you're already doing. So it's things like go do PvP, go get stars, go destroy defenders. It scales as you go up in ages at both the rewards and the difficulty. So a person in the classical age is going to have an easier time getting through the event than somebody in the atomic age. And also the rewards get better. And we sort of have 5 tiers of rewards. Goes from, 5 tiers of rewards goes from like kind of a trivial one-troop tactic to some resources to up at the top you get a unique building or unit that you can't get anywhere else. And the events were broken into these 3 phases. You have a preview phase, an event phase, and a claim period. And there'll be one gem here for everybody. The events, when they're turned on, they have a HUD button indicating that an event's going on. And they have this preview pop-up. It tells you kind of the details of the event. It hints at like what you need to do. It hints at the rewards. But it also has these recommended items along the bottom. And this is kind of really key. We also did a bunch of nerd text that nobody reads, but we love writing it. Maybe one day we'll kickstart a DomiNations encyclopedia, but I think that would have no buyers either. All right, so the event would run. You would go do things. In this case, you're killing defending buildings, and you're trying to get rewards from it. But the preview period is important, and this is something that was sort of eye-opening for us that our servicing was poor. We put a set of recommended items in the event that we said, hey, these will help you get through the event. Sometimes it's actually true. Sometimes it's just like they're just there to be something you click on. And you can see the flow of people kind of participating in the event. They'll actually go and they'll click on those items, and they'll go and upgrade them. Those are upgrades they could get in the game no matter what. It's nothing to do with the event running or not. It's just that we surfaced it well. So by putting a button in front of players to go click on and upgrade, we got like a 1.1 increase in paid crown spend, and that's not trivial. Over time, that adds up, and that's just putting buttons on a pop-up. More details on that, because this is our Mark of the Assassin event. It's the first Ninja event we did. You can see by just putting the recommended items on the preview period, we got increased in paid crown spend on those. Again, you could go do these things in the store for free as you're playing, but we, by putting it on the pop-up, we were able to goose that spend on the buildings we wanted to. All right, I'm going to burn through this to the end, because this is stuff you guys want to know. This is all bad stuff. So this is a event we ran where we tried to get 15% tier 5 completion. It was our thumb in the air figuring out is that right or not. But we wanted about 75% tier 1, and it got harder. Almost my time too, so you don't have to suffer through this much longer. By tier 5 on this event, at least, we were so off in our balancing that we had almost nobody besides the most hardcore players finishing the event. This would be the classic 4-finger event, to use the last speaker's terminology. It's so bad, at least, that we needed a YouTube. One of our players had to do YouTube videos on sort of how to complete the event. And I think if you're designing events where you can't figure them out in game, you get very little completion, and you've got to go out of game to figure out what they're doing, you've designed a bad event. All right, final phase. This is how we got better. We standardized the tooling. We did everything in Google Docs for a long time, but they were different and disparate. We sort of made them all the same format, and that let us build tooling around it, automated CSV uploaders, automated things with just less copy-paste errors that we were having in live. We built a pop-up system that allowed for multiple pop-ups at the same time, both sales and config events. Anything we had, special deals, you had a home there. And this is sort of the biggest revenue push, and I could do a whole bad talk about this, but we sold direct item sales. And this is sort of what we knew we were doing well in DomiNations. We were building great content, and we kind of had great design, but we just had no way for people to see it or do it. So we put direct item sales in the game, and they did really well for us. Our next steps for this is putting them in what we call mystery crates. And that's sort of our whole gotcha system that's coming out this year. Item sales. And we built tooling around the config events going on and off. So we have a robot now that turns things on and off. Before, we had our QA manager kind of wake you up in the morning and turning on the config events at the right time and turning them off, or like pulling over in traffic if he was late. And this is the tool we built for that. It's sort of also a slam dunk for PlayFab and what they do. Like, if you're building that now, like, think about other options you can do and not go through the same headaches we had. We called the config event tool CESPR. Now we did targeting. All right, and here's sort of what you want to get to. This is our LiveOps calendar in January of 2016. Did it all in Google Docs. You can see there's a lot of white space there, nothing going on. This is our LiveOps calendar today, and so you're just layering stuff on top of one another. But in order to do that, you got to build tooling. You got to make sure your game's stable. You got to be doing all the analysis. And the culmination of all this, and we're going to get right on time here, is this config event system event. Sales running now called Summer for the Ages. We're pushing people through. We're targeting specific ages with good discounts so people can get through the ages fast because we're doing it in advance of our next big age update. Cold War coming soon. And if I'm going to give you any advice coming out of this, would be listen to the previous speaker. He had everything so right. If he was there 2 years ago, if I was here 2 years ago, oh man, I'd be talking about 300 million in sales, 30, 40 million installs. It'd be crazy. But for me, at least, like build to your team and your game strength. Like we were great artists, great designers. We built events that were content heavy, but also paid back. It also allowed us to have these units and buildings for sales in the future. Identify your pain points. For us, it was this Google Doc nightmare and this hand editing. We keep making mistakes. Build tools to automate that. Or buy tools that automate that already. Consider the long term. Like for us, like we were constantly kind of focused on what was here and now. And that's where we ran into events like the pop-up where you can only pop up one thing at a time. But make sure you're continuing to move forward. You can design the best multi-pop-up system. And if it takes a year for you to do, you've done something wrong. You've lost that year of capitalizing on your users and sales. Have 6 months of content at launch. Like this is a no-brainer. If you can't actually have 6 months, if it's too expensive for you to do that and you've got to launch, like figure out how to redesign your game to move 6 months out. I know that's a tough endeavor for a lot of folks, but this is something big because you're going to have fires you need to fight. Launch is always a terrible, exciting time. And look at market leaders. What SpaceApe is doing today is going to be common practice in 6 months. What DomiNations is trying to do now, in 6 months' time, we'll be behind. So always look at what people are doing now, especially if you're launching a title, because that's what's going to be commonplace. And then make sure you have a stable game. All of this goes away if you can't keep your servers up, if you can't keep your players in the game. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Josh. That was fantastic.